Welcome to the Healthy Careers Podcast, where we help healthcare providers succeed on purpose. We take a conversational approach in learning from others who have been there and done that. Join us as we share expert insights from real people who are just like you, because we believe that success isn't just a destination. It's an intentional journey, and you don't have to do it alone.
In this episode, the information discussed is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. The content is based on general financial principles and concepts, and individual financial situations may vary. Listeners are encouraged to consult with a qualified financial, legal, tax, and/or any other advisor that they may have for personalized advice regarding their specific financial circumstances. Any action taken by readers or listeners based on the information presented in this episode is at their own discretion and risk. It is the responsibility of readers to conduct their own research and due diligence before making any financial decisions. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Careers Podcast. I'm your host, Madison Loomis, and today I am with Caleb Pepperday, who is the owner of Advanced Practice Planning, LLC, and he helps APPs to strategize their finances and get to a better place, probably more peace of mind. I found personally in working with APPs that they're extremely smart, but they don't always have the time nor the knowledge that they learn in PA school about their finances. So Caleb's here today to teach us a few things and tell us about how he helps the industry.
Yeah, thank you, Madison. Happy to be here and happy to drop some knowledge here and hopefully get some info out into the APP world.
Definitely. And I'm so curious too, because as somebody that owns a business and somebody that is very aware of my finances. I grew up with a dad who taught personal finance in school and was an accountant previous to that. I've always been very aware of money, but you forget that most of the world is not. And so I think first and foremost, I always tell people when learning about this stuff that you're not alone. A lot of people don't have this awareness because it's not taught in school. It's not like we learn how to square dance before we learn how to do our taxes.
It truly is incredible. It's like one of those, it's like a mystery when you get your first paycheck, you know. I was kind of think back to the Friends episode and, when Phoebe says, who's FICA and why are they taking all my money? So it's just kind of a mystery, and hopefully, after today, we'll kind of shed a little bit of light on some strategies, especially for PAs that can kind of implement to make sure that they're on the right track, especially as they get, obviously a lot of APPs and physicians, obviously great earners, want to make sure that we're taking that paycheck and making sure we're making it go as far as we possibly can.
Definitely, especially with rising costs of student loans and schooling to become a PA or NP. So I guess first and foremost, Caleb, I want to know what got you to this point, because a lot of financial experts, I feel like, kind of work with anybody and everybody, right? And they might specialize in helping small business owners, but yours is super niche. And I'm curious to know, like, what inspired you to market and work specifically with APPs?
Yeah, great question. So just a little bit of my background here. I worked at several different firms before I ultimately decided to kind of launch my own practice here. And really what I found through working with different clients, I've worked from, everybody from a new grad that, just trying to get their footing underneath them to, people that are selling businesses for multi-million dollars. And what I've found was, there's such an array of different knowledge and different gaps out there. And especially in the medical community, I think that's really where I found that there was a great spot for me to jump in. I saw with my brother, my brother's a physician, a radiologist. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of people that are willing and able to help out physicians and that subset of the medical field, but not a ton of people out there ready and willing to help out the mid-level providers. So the APPs, the nurse practitioners, PAs, and so on. And so my wife is actually a PA, and, when she graduated school, basically she had one 30-minute presentation at college, and that was her financial knowledge to kind of go out and succeed. So I was ready to kind of fill that gap here. And, it's, been in business here a little less than a year so far. And, I've been fortunate to help out a lot of PAs and NPs along the way, and excited to obviously continue that.
So I think what I found too, and when I opened my business, I saw there was also a huge gap. Like there's tons of physician recruitment agencies and there's tons of nurse recruitment agencies, and you look at locums and all this, but I think there's a trend where a lot of times because PAs and NPs are not as well known in the healthcare ecosystem as to the value that they bring and the collaboration and where they fit in. People that are in healthcare know this, but a lot of times people that are starting businesses do not. And so they either, are helping nurses and medical assistants, or they're helping physicians, but how about the PAs and NPs? Because I think that's something that is kind of gone without for a while. So it's great to know there's businesses like yours that are seeing that need and fulfilling it, because so many times I talk to either experienced people and or people coming out of school, and when I'm offering them jobs and looking at contracts and trying to negotiate things with them, they just look at it for what it is rather than what they can do with that money, and like you're saying, how they can optimize the spend, the save, the investment of all of that.
Yeah, for sure. And the APP field is such a a growing field right now that I think a lot of times when people are coming out of school and they're trying to decide, hey, should I go to med school or should I go to one of these other programs? I mean, especially the PA program, I know for my wife was kind of a no brainer, because it's a much shorter timeline to kind of get to working working age, and then also a lot lighter debt load, and then ultimately a lot less liability too. So, I mean, I think that's a big piece of it as well, where you can really just focus on doing your job rather than worrying about, getting sued all the time and that side of the unfortunate side of medicine that a lot of physicians go through.
Yeah, that's very true. I didn't think about it that way. And I've got family members that are PAs as well, and it's unfortunate that there hasn't been as much resources, and I think that schooling is getting better. Like PA programs are trying to integrate more of this financial acumen, but I've also found that a lot of times, just from like a interest standpoint, right? Like I went to school actually abroad for some time in Panama, and by the high school age, yeah, it was awesome. But by high school age, they had divvied kind of your skill set up. So you were either business oriented and you were taking finance and accounting and all of the business oriented coursework so that you could go on and be the business leaders, or you were a science kid and you were learning biology and chemistry and you were going to go and become nurses and doctors. And it was like at that point, they felt like you either knew your aptitude was one or the other. And I think everybody has the aptitude to do either of them. It's just that some of us lead one way or the other first. Naturally, I'm much more business oriented. And so things for me that maybe make sense have to be a learned skill for somebody else, to where brain surgery for them is not that hard. But for me, like I would be lost as can be, And that's where I think people like you, who obviously know all of these things that even I don't know, can help them to understand not just I'm making $120,000 a year, I'm making $180,000 a year, but what am I doing with that money? Where is it going? What am I putting it towards? So that it makes sense. And year over year, I'm building wealth rather than just pissing away money, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's such an important piece of the puzzle. And really what I find too is especially with people, the more income you make, the lesser the focus is on budgeting as well. Because, right, you have a lot more discretionary income. If you're making $50,000 a year, you got to know where those dollars are going, because you have rent to pay, you have mortgages, you have, groceries and all those types of things. But you can be a little bit more loose with your spending, as your income grows. And what I've found is that, clients that I have, or, prospects that I talk to that implement kind of a reverse budgeting strategy to their finances and focus on, savings and investing and making sure they're protected, from an insurance standpoint first, and focus on those goals, and then kind of use what's left over to do, vacations or kind of, buy clothes or groceries or whatnot. they end up having a lot more success because they're prioritizing their financial goals first. And then the beauty of it is when you use the reverse budgeting strategy, you're putting the right amounts of way, in the different vehicles, whether it's your 401k, a Roth IRA, HSA, things like that, that you can actually be a little bit more free with your spending. You don't have to worry about, hey, is this latte gonna, screw up my retirement plan?
I hope
Spoiler,
not
it's
for
not.
me, because I go there sometimes two times a day.
And that's kind of the beauty of the reverse budgeting is that, once you kind of get the big things taken care of, that little spending doesn't honestly really matter that much. And that's
Right.
what I try to get people to focus on, and limiting expenses really on the big stuff, right? So, making sure that, when you come out of school, you don't necessarily need a new BMW to get to work. You can, afford to have maybe a CRV or, a Subaru or something like that that's going to get the job done, and it's going to be able to make, allow you to build wealth a lot better along the way. And then as you accumulate wealth and you kind of, jump up the ladder, so to speak, you can afford to, have a different, spending approach as you need to over time. But that's really what I've seen, have a lot of success on the starting point of a lot of, APPs when they begin their career after school.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's also like a generational thing. Like, I grew up with parents who are through and through boomers, who are like the concept of delayed gratification. And that is like ingrained in me, especially having parents that were so financially aware, and they were teachers. So they had to budget, right? They had 3 kids and they were probably working off of maybe $80,000, $90,000 a year at the time. And that was like once they got to a steady point of their career. And you think of people coming out of school, new grads, saying, oh shoot, I'm going to be making $110,000, $120,000. And that's a big figure to them. And so they go and they buy the fancy vehicle, or they go and they get the nice clothes and spend without thinking, okay, 5 years from now, right, if I'd saved this money and maybe gotten a Toyota or something that was a little bit more economically sound or safe, what could I have put that towards that's actually going to build wealth rather than just make money? That's been my biggest thing, is like when you're raised with somewhat of a scarcity mind, is that the right word? Scarcity, whatever. Mindset of like, it's going to go away. You think of money that way. But now as an adult, I'm like, okay, if I have $100, I could either put that in the bank, or I could invest $20 over here and invest $10 over here. And then that money is going to make me money rather than just go spend $100. And that's where I think there's a huge shift in building wealth rather than just having money, because you can have a lot of money in the bank and it's not doing anything for you.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And then I think on the flip side too, I kind of have the beauty of working with clients, all over the age spectrum. I have new grads, and I also have, clients that are either in retirement or getting close to retirement. And I think you can go too far to the extreme too, is somebody that's worried about every single penny that you spend. And then you get to retirement, and then your mindset is so focused on, I can't spend money, I can't take money out of my accounts, that you get to a point where, you're living in retirement and you might have a decent nest egg that, even if you're taking small bits from it, it's still growing and accumulating for the future. So I think building good habits along the way and focusing on the big things that matter, limiting some of those big expenses, are going to go a long way to having more financial success than kind of worrying about nitpicking on, oh, did I spend $50 on Amazon, or did I go out to eat this one time? That stuff honestly doesn't really matter as much as limiting expenses on housing, cars, insurance, things like that. So, I think that that's a great place to start, especially, if you're a younger APP and getting started to one, that gives you a little bit more flexibility than to either one, save, or two, obviously student loans are a big deal right now. And if you're not going towards the public student loan forgiveness, or you're not going towards one of the income-driven repayment forgiveness plans, if you're looking to pay down debt, it frees up money that you can become then more financially independent over time. So the beauty of cash flow can go a long way to setting you up for the future.
Yeah. And I guess, what have you found, and I'm just trying to make this so that somebody's listening and they're like, okay, so what are those big ticket items? Because I think that also varies depending on somebody's upbringing. Like if somebody turns 16 and their parents could afford them to give them a Beamer, they might not
Yeah.
think that that's a big thing, right? Like to me, I'd be like, oh my gosh, but not everyone has that same filter of money, right? Or where it came from or the work that it took to get there. So in general, what would you label as some of those big ticket items that you would somewhat be more careful about putting spend towards?
Yeah, honestly, I think the biggest one that's overlooked is transportation. Especially right now, where if you have a family, let's say you're married even, and you have two car payments. One of the biggest things I try to emphasize to clients is, as much as possible, if you're a family, try to limit your household car payments to one at a time. Because let's say you're both even buying reasonable cars. Let's say you have like a Toyota RAV4 and your payments, let's say $700 a month, $600 a month. Let's say the other spouse has the same equivalent car. I mean, you're looking at $1,400 a month. That's just kind of going into a depreciating asset. And, the goal here isn't necessarily to say, all right, everybody needs to go out and buy a Honda and drive it for 300,000 miles. But the goal is to just be more aware of the dollars that you're putting into specific, expenses. So again, housing is another big one, but honestly, it's tricky right now because we've seen over the last really 3 years, housing nationwide has jumped up 30%. So, it's somewhat out of your control. As far as housing costs goes, but I think too, especially now with a lot more people working from home, housing, even if you're buying a bigger house, might make more sense. And if you're, let's say, you're self-employed like I am, there's tax benefits to having a home office and things like that. So transportation, housing, those are really the big ticket items I think that go the farthest. As far as trying to control those. But as a general rule of thumb, what I like to tell people is if you've never budgeted before and you're looking at just kind of either creating a budget or using, let's say you're not trying to use the reverse budgeting strategy, a good place to start is spending 50% of your income on needs, 20% of your 30% of your net income on wants. So that might be buying some different things that monetary value, or let's say one of your wants is to be able to take a sabbatical. So you might be saving into a separate savings account or saving for the future. And then 20% of your income should go towards more long-term savings. So 50% to needs, 30% to wants, 20% to savings is kind of a baseline of what I recommend. So, that can go a long way to helping people, kind of get on the right foot. It's easier said than done, but you got to start somewhere.
Okay, so I'm just learning this myself. So 50% to needs, 20% you said, or 30%?
Yeah, 30% to wants and then 20% to savings.
Okay. Yeah. And I think there's so many people out there too that give all this information. Like there's a lot of people, and I'm going to ask because I've listened to his stuff and I know that there's like a push and a pull of people that think he hung the moon and then people that think his advice is trash. Dave Ramsey.
Yep.
Like, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, that's a bit of a loaded question. I would say he's got a lot of good recommendations for people that are just getting started, and they need a base to kind of get their financial house in order, so to speak. There's some other things that a lot of it, professionals maybe wouldn't agree with, maybe, some around debt elimination, and those types of things. And, spending too. I think some of his goals for people that, spending, in lifestyle is just frankly unrealistic.
Yeah. He's very conservative about where you spend. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's a good start. It's somewhere, if you've never done any planning, that's at least a place where you can look and see, all right, here's maybe some of the basics that I can get down. Right. And then, if you're looking to kind of have a little bit more of individualized advice, that's when you would either, kind of seek out a professional or kind of learn more of a DIY approach. But I think one thing to focus on there too is is he focuses a lot on debt management. And I think especially for medical providers, it's important to recognize that not all debt is created equal.
No. Yeah.
And so I think especially for medical providers, you want to make sure that if you're following some of his advice, especially around student loans, you want to be careful because you might be leaving a lot of free money on the table. So let's say you're working at a nonprofit and you're able to qualify for PSLF. Why would you want to pay that off early when there's potential for tax-free forgiveness in the future? So,
That's a good point.
I think one of the problems with, kind of advice that's projected out to the masses is that it has to be general by nature. Because as you get into more individualized advice, everybody's situation is different, and that's where the nuances come in. So I would just say be careful, with any sort of advice that you hear. You want to make sure that one, you're getting it from a qualified professional if you're searching that out as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say go run on TikTok and look for all your financial advice. I would probably look out for some sort of professional, whether it's a CFP or somebody that kind of has the knowledge of the industry, so to speak, to make sure that you are doing the right things at the right time.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, what's so nice about what you do is people could say, okay, I'm going to kind of DIY. And I think about this with my own, business too. You could go out and recruit your own people, whether or not you're doing it strategically, probably not, like you could post Indeed and go find a provider. And are you vetting the right things to ensure that your turnover is not going to be high? Are you vetting the right things to make sure that you're strategizing on the long term of how you're then going to promote that person internally and retain them? Probably not, and it's the same thing for you. Like you could go follow a kind of DIY framework for finance stuff, but your goals are going to differ than mine, and my goals are going to differ than, my friends, and everybody's family situation is different. And so working with somebody like you allows you to go outside of just the framework and say, okay, we're creating this bespoke, personalized approach so that it's optimized for what you need, not what the general public or the masses need. And I think that's what's so valuable about hiring somebody like you is you're going to take into account all those things and create something that is not just, we're going to eliminate debt, but it's a lifestyle implementation of something that is you can sustain. It's not like you're going to eat hot dogs and bread for the next 3 years until you pay off your debt.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of important to outline here too, when you're working with a, financial professional, one of the biggest things that they can help you is trying to, see the overall big picture. Right. I think it's easy to get hyper focused on a certain, portion of your financial plan, but some of the things I see often overlooked is, what are the tax implications of the decisions I'm making? How does that impact my overall finances? Am I actually saving enough for one retirement? But there's a bit of a new phenomenon too in the way that people retire. It's not the 9 to 5 till 65 anymore. No. I think the approach is changing a lot more too with people in medicine, just because of the higher burnout rates and stuff like that too. So, having somebody that can help you figure out, okay, am I able to take a year off as a sabbatical? How do I plan for that? And how do I make sure that if I'm going to do something like that, how am I going to be still on track for the long term? And I think that that's really important too. And, how I approach things from my firm is I'm what they call fee only financial advisor. So I don't sell insurance. I don't sell investments. Basically you just pay for the advice that you get. So it's kind of working with a consultant. You kind of get a roadmap, so to speak. And, either you can have me help you implement that. Or if you say, hey, Caleb, thanks for the info, I'm going to do it on my own. You have the option to do that. So that's a little bit different than a lot of other firms where they either require you to purchase some type of investment or insurance,
right?
Or they have to have you have to have a minimum asset level to even work with someone.
Yeah.
So
that is really cool. Yeah, it's good to know.
So my goal is to make sure that it's available for everybody, and that Whether you're somebody that's 65 years old getting ready to retire, or if you're 25 coming out of school, that everybody has the opportunity to kind of get the advice that they need.
Yeah, for sure. And what has been, I guess, like, maybe we can go over 3 of your top bits of information without giving away kind of the secret sauce, because again, I like to reiterate that a lot of these Dave Ramsey type of programs, they are made to be very general in nature. So it's like, hey, these are best practices across the board, right? Like, don't spend more than what you make and save X amount for your emergency fund. And I think everybody has heard those things. And I think, quite honestly, that's a lot of what they're teaching in school, at least what I learned in high school, of like personal finance really wasn't strategic in nature at all. So I guess if you could give us maybe like your top 3 pieces of advice that you give folks, again, without giving away your trade, but just kind of things to think about maybe when you are helping people and trying to figure out like if you're the right person for them.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I see, from just a saving standpoint is that a lot of clients have a goal to retire before the golden age of 59 and a half for retirement. And the problem is that most of the assets are accumulated in qualified programs. So whether that's a 401k, a 403b, a Roth IRA, all great, options to use, but there's a limited availability of, being able to get to those assets. So what I actually recommend for a lot of clients too is just kind of having a little bit more tax diversification in the way that you're saving for retirement. So a lot of my clients, or me personally, we've set up what they call a brokerage account. And the way I refer to it is kind of an independence account. So it's an account that you can use really however you want to. So if you want to save for a house, if you want to save for taking a sabbatical, if you want to save for retiring early, this is kind of the bucket to do so, the program to do it in. And there's no penalties, to withdraw the asset before the 59 and a half. Now you're still going to pay like capital gains or taxes on dividends. There's no real way of getting around that, but it's giving you an ability to accumulate assets and actually be able to, access them when you need them.
Yeah.
So I think that, brokerage accounts are often overlooked. And I think it's a very important, piece to the puzzle, so to speak. So I would say that's number 1. Number 2, especially for medical providers, is don't overlook disability insurance. It's a huge piece of the puzzle. The biggest asset a lot of medical providers have, as they're early in their career or even mid-career professionals, is their ability to earn money. And looking for a disability policy that has what they call an own occupation rider, which allows you basically to, if you, God forbid, were to get disabled, it basically protects you from needing to go back to work. Let's just say you're a physician, for example.
Sure.
And you're in what they call any occupation definition of disability inside a policy. Let's say you're, outside and you're working in your, cutting down a tree and you accidentally cut 3 of your fingers off and you're a surgeon, right?
Yeah.
So that's gonna limit your ability, obviously, to do surgery in the future. If you were enrolled in a policy that has an any occupation rider, basically that benefit can more or less stop paying if you can go back and do any sort of work. So if you can go back and be a Walmart greeter, basically the policy in that circumstance has the potential to not pay out anymore, even if you still need the disability benefits. Where it's really important to focus on what they call an own occupation rider, which means that if, let's say the same scenario, you're working outside, you cut a few of your fingers off, you are, not able to go back and do the same work that you were doing. Your benefit will still pay out, even if you're able to go out and get another job. So let's say you can go be a professor, but you just can't actually operate in the operating room. There's potential then for you to be able to collect,
whatever your pay was. Yeah.
And then also earn, an actual income. So I think that is a very overlooked piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of, bad actors, so to speak, out there in the insurance industry that kind of sell policies
Abuse
just to
it.
kind
Yeah.
of earn a commission. But I think it's important to kind of have an impartial third party that kind of helps you evaluate the programs. It doesn't have,
Yeah.
a tie to compensation that can kind of help you say, hey, this program's good. Yeah, this one's not. Or yes, you need a supplement. No, you don't. So that's
Yeah.
another big piece of the puzzle piece. That's interesting. Let's think about this. So
And don't give away
I would
too much because we want them to stay on their seats. We want them to reach out to you after. So if you're listening to this, don't think that this is all you need to figure out your finances. There's so much more to it.
Yeah, I would say final piece is that just being more conscious of where the money that you're earning is actually going to. So
Yeah.
one of the biggest pieces that I've seen just from obviously this is something I do on a regular basis, but being aware of making sure like your paycheck is actually correct. I've my wife recently she got a raise, right? Well, the raise wasn't correct in her paycheck, and it went on for a couple days, and it's only a couple dollars an hour, so it doesn't necessarily make a big difference. But if you
But over time,
multiply, right? It's a couple $100s a pay times 26 pays a year. I mean, it's thousands of dollars. So, I think just setting and forgetting is a good strategy, for saving for retirement, and it kind of keeps you from making mistakes that you otherwise would for emotional reasons. But
right.
I think the kind of common advice is of set and forget it kind of gets extrapolated into different areas of finance where you can't necessarily do that, right?
Yeah.
Budgeting, you kind of have to be a little bit more aware of where your money's going. You have to be aware of, in your paycheck, where are you, actually putting money to? How much are you saving in your 401k? All these ancillary benefits that you may have been automatically enrolled in. Are they actually benefiting you? Should you actually be using them? Things like that, I think, are super important. Also, from I'll use an example of a paycheck. Just because your employer is taking a certain dollar amount out in taxes doesn't mean that that's actually what your tax liability is. So I think it's very important to be, to recognize that you either need to recruit some sort of professional, whether it's a CPA or an enrolled agent, to kind of help you figure out what your tax liability is, or put in the work as a DIY person to figure out how much money do I actually need to be paying in taxes. And I always like to say you want to pay your fair share to the government, but you don't want to give them a tip. So you want to make sure that you're keeping the assets that you can for as long as possible, and making sure that you can use those in different aspects, whether it's saving or paying down debt, or just spending money on stuff that you like. So those would be my three keys.
Awesome. I think that's helpful, and I think it's funny because it kind of integrates a little bit. A lot of times when I'm working with candidates and they get an offer, and it might be, I'll just use the figure of $100,000, right? And it's like, okay, but you have to look at the whole package, because if they have a plan like a health savings account or something where you can put money in that you're not going to get taxed on, or if you are doing locums or you're a 1099 type of provider, there are so many other ways that you can go about this, right? Like if you are a 1099 person and you open up an LLC to where you funnel and that's how you're paid, well, guess what? You can go out and get a vehicle and 179 the vehicle if it's over a certain amount of gross weight. Like there's so many different strategic things that you can do. And I know that doesn't apply to every provider, but even in just negotiating your salary, understanding where you can, and I hate to say it, but kind of not hide money because they know you're making it, but not be taxed on money. And that makes up those small habits of, I like to go get a Starbucks a day, because you can't stop living. You can't be so worried about money that you forget to live life in the interim either. And I think there is I've been on that side of the extreme where I was paying down debt and I followed the Dave Ramsey thing. And my dad was like, okay, you've got to stop making it your life, what's motivation to have absolutely no debt, because life is funny that way. You can pay off a vehicle, which I did. I paid off my car, and 6 months later, I totaled it and got into an accident.
Yeah.
So now what, right? Like, got to go get another vehicle. And I had insurance, so they paid me for it. But still, I mean,
Right.
you can plan all you want, but sometimes life happens, and that's where you can't sweat the small stuff. But it's also just so important to work with somebody like you who can help people see the big picture and then say, okay, instead of worrying about it, as long as you have a plan, then if something goes a little bit astray, it's okay because you have a plan and you can get back to it and you can figure
Yeah.
out where you want to spend your money. Like maybe somebody wants to spend a little bit more on their car, but they're fine with living in a smaller house, or they want to spend a little
Yeah.
bit more on their house, but they're fine with a smaller car, or having just a family vehicle because only one person works, and finding ways to really strategically look at it rather than just say, well, I make $100,000 a year.
Yeah, I think that that's super important too, and I think social media is a great piece of learning, and obviously this is how we got connected. This is how the
Yeah.
podcast comes out, but there's
Yeah.
also downsides to it as well, especially from I would say like a personal finance and even just a lifestyle approach where there's so much information and so much noise about either whether it's life hacking or whether it's trying to optimize every single piece of your life, and it's
Yeah.
if you try to do that, you're going to go crazy. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just not worth it. And that's what I try to emphasize a lot with clients, and what I've honestly earlier in my career I would have had people more focused on savings and trying to limit spending in different areas. But as I've grown and I've worked with clients and got experience in these different areas, I've learned that, if you're keeping your plan inside of guide rails and you're keeping yourself on a general track, one,
Yeah.
it's way less stress, and two, it's easier to stick with.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times too, especially if you don't reach one of your goals, then all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, I didn't achieve that, so I kind of throw everything else to the side. Whereas if you kind of have a general plan, it's like, okay, maybe I hit 3 of my 5 goals this year, but that's still great progress towards the future.
Yeah.
So, I think that's super important, and then super important too from just a career standpoint. I'm sure you see a lot with working with with different professionals is everybody tries to achieve everything in kind of one swoop, but it might take a few different positions to kind of actually get where you want to be.
Yeah.
And it's important to kind of enjoy the journey along the way and not just, kind of always focus on the end point.
100%. Yeah. No, I think that's all really great advice. And so tell us, because a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are APPs. So they might be thinking, well, I don't know if I'm ready for that step. I think a lot of people fear the accountability of it. But as
Yeah.
you're saying, I think you're somebody that takes a very realistic approach to it, where it's not like this all or nothing type of plan or advice that you're giving. It's more so creating long-term plans that, may ebb and flow as time goes on, as you're in different positions, as life happens.
Yeah.
But how do they get in contact with you, and what does that look like in partnership with you? I know you mentioned they can do just like one-on-one advice type of stuff, or they can partner with you on a higher level.
Yeah. No, great question. And really, I'll start here. So a lot of times I get the question of, when do I actually need a financial advisor
Yeah.
or a financial professional? And I think that the asset level in a lot of respects is kind of irrelevant. What I've found is that when you are trying to make a decision that's big enough that you would regret it if you messed it up. So that's where I can, kind of help fill the gap, where if you're like, man, I have this decision about student loans, or I have a decision about what I should do with my retirement plan, and I don't want to mess it up. That's kind of a spot where you want to recruit a professional to come in and fill that gap or help with that pain point.
Yep.
I think a lot of times people can honestly do a lot of planning on their own, but it's when they get to those big decisions that it's, time
Vital.
to then, kind of recruit somebody else to help you out. So, from how to work with me from that standpoint, the best way to get in contact with me is if you go to my website, advancedpracticeplanning.com, and then there's a link to book a free consultation and just figure out if one, after we, go through the introductory process, if it's something that you're interested in learning more about. And I have case studies and things like that on my website that you can kind of get a flavor of what a plan would look like. But, the different ways to work with me are, like I said, if you're someone that is looking for a kind of a plan that, one, you have somebody help you with the recommendations, and then, you want to implement that on your own. That's certainly an option as well. That's kind of my one-time planning feature. If you're looking for more of ongoing coaching, I have a monthly program that kind of is more of an accountability program. We'll cover a lot of the same stuff, but it's going to be, have somebody there along the way to help you make sure you're, it's one thing to have the recommendations, but it's another thing to actually implement them and implement them correctly.
Definitely.
So that's another piece. And then a lot of times I have clients who just say, hey, I have these old retirement plans, or I want to help to make sure I'm saving actually into the right investments and the right vehicles. And then I do help out with investment management and, do have a cost associated with that as well. But, my goal is to make sure that advice is available for anybody that wants it. And, really it's just figuring out what service would be best for you in your point in life. So
definitely.
That's kind of the approach I take. And, I'm very focused on education and kind of promoting the profession here. So if it's stuff that I feel like, hey, we would be a great fit to work together, I'll tell you that. Or if there's a point where it's, honestly not worth it on your end from a fee standpoint to kind of pay me to do the things that I need to do, it's more basic. I'll just, tell you on the call and help you get those little things that you need to get done. So that's what I'm big on. I'm big on focusing on people that are willing and able to take the next steps and are wanting to be held accountable for making sure they're making the right decisions. So
definitely. And I
appreciate the time today, and this is great, and getting the word out there, and hopefully shedding some light on personal finance.
Yes, 100%. We need more of that in the world. And I think there's, just from my own experience, Caleb, I've, always been aware of my money and probably at a time, probably too aware to where, I'd be like rationing out like what each pound of chicken was at the grocery store. And, at Sam's Club, while I'm already getting this huge discount. And now I'm to the point where I'm like, oh man, maybe I should look to see how much I spent at Dunkin' this week. Probably way too much, but, I think we all start somewhere, and it's a great start for anybody, and obviously specific APPs to work with you. So if you're listening and thinking about that step, definitely reach out to Caleb. I'll make sure his LinkedIn, his website, all of that is attached to the show notes so that you can easily go and chat with him. And thank you so much for sharing your insight and coming on the podcast today. It was fun, and I learned some stuff as well.
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here, and looking forward to maybe future opportunities, future guest appearances.
Definitely. Awesome.
All right.
Until next time, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Healthy Careers Podcast, where we provide a platform for you to ask hard questions and get real answers. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. Stay tuned for more episodes every other Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern.